Yep, guys. Unfortunately, this PlayStation 3 has the infamous yellow light of death. Hopefully by the end of today's video, I will have revived this system and hopefully start to get on the path to restore this beast. If any of you guys don't know, not only is this the PlayStation 3, the cool one with the Spider-Man 3 font on it, this is indeed the CHECHA 01 model, meaning this PlayStation 3 is 100% capable of doing backwards compatibility on most PlayStation 1 games and all PlayStation 2 games. Not only can this just run digital PlayStation 2 games on it, it just plays PlayStation 2 discs straight up. It has both the PlayStation 2 CPU and GPU built into this. Now, the reason why I got one is this is actually my second system. I have another one that had this same exact problem that lasted a few years that I jailbroke, and it just kept dying, and we'll get into the details of why they die later. But in the process of repairing mine, let's see if I can show you guys. I killed my CPU. I dug a massive chunk out of the substrate and essentially destroyed this very rare backwards compatible PS3 logic board. But I am going to keep it as parts. This was kind of an expensive learning lesson, but I went to it knowing I could possibly break it. But hopefully I don't do the same on this. This video guide is going to be a two-part series. In the first part, we are going to hopefully diagnose and repair the yellow light of death with heat. Basically, that's all we're going to do is heat. And again, I'll get into the specifics later. After that, the second part is going to be delidding the CPU and GPU the proper way without destroying it, and testing temperatures both without a delid. We'll do temperatures on just a standard repaste when we do this. A delid with good thermal paste and a delid with liquid metal, which a lot of people don't do liquid metal, so I wanted to do my own test and get a comparison between the two. But yeah, other than that, this PlayStation 3 is not in great physical shape. This slot right here is broken. This panel is super just destroyed. It is chewed up. But I have some parts, and hopefully we can restore this thing pretty well. So I had to move it on over to the wide angle. I know where I have my camera set up doesn't have the best view of this, but I'm working with what I got here. And this really isn't meant to be necessarily a disassembly video, just, something to be in the background while I talk about a lot of the issues and cool facts about this PlayStation 3. There's plenty of better tear down guides online that you can look at. Especially my favorite one is the iFixit web tutorial, not the video, but just a text guide. It works pretty well. So fortunately for me, this PlayStation 3 has not been opened, which is what I wanted. I was looking for one that no one had attempted to repair or have touched. So I'm just peeling off this warranty void if removed sticker. It is possible that they could have worked on it and just peeled the sticker on and off without damaging it, but I very highly doubt it. So right here, peeled off the sticker, and then there is a little cover that covers a screw that I just broke the rubber on. Yeah, these things are old. Things are weak on it. That rubber just immediately fell apart. So looking in here, it seems to be a Torx bit. And the secret weapon for this project, for being able to have a successful repair and have everything you need, honestly, is just having an iFixit kit. This tool right here is what spoiler alert, this is eventually what I use to delid the CPU, and yeah, it worked really good. This cut straight into it. It's thin, it's flexible, you can warm it up, it works good. Just spoiler alert. That's what I used on my test system. I'm also going to go ahead and pull the drive out. I don't think that's necessary for disassembly, but I have a bigger drive that I'm going to be putting in it, so I might as well get it out and out of the way. I'm going to hold on to it because having an original 60GB hard drive, like an OEM drive, might be worth something. I highly doubt it, but it's cool nonetheless. I like to hoard this type of stuff. So we're just going to go ahead and pull this out, and then let's go ahead and get to this bolt. And I really don't like this tool from iFixit, but it works decently. I can use it as an extension, hopefully. Let's see. Let's try it without it first. I believe this is the bit I need. Torx 220. Let me see. No, I need something a little bit smaller. Actually, it looks like I don't need the extension. And my cat decided that he wanted to come up here and be nosy and check everything out. That's not the right size either. Hey, buddy. You have to get down. Oh, he's adorable. Let's see. There we go. Okay. But like I was saying, these systems are really cool. It sucks. Well, it's not. It doesn't. Actually, I don't even know why I began to say it sucks. I had like one complaint, but now that I think about it, there's really not much to complain about. Oh, I remember. It just sucks that the PS4 couldn't do backwards compatibility for the PS3. I understand why. I understand the technical limitations behind it. It just sucks nonetheless. It was because this is a very hard system to emulate. Like, the cell processor was no joke, man. Like, it was really powerful. And a matter of fact, I saw something the other day about just how powerful the cell was for the time. Supposedly the cell processor was like more powerful than i7s from like 2017, 2018, just because of how the cell was designed. It was hard to get power out of it, but once you did, you could do crazy stuff. I mean, look at games like The Last of Us. Like, games that look like that shouldn't have ran on 7th generation console. Like, that game looked insane. But it just sucks that Sony couldn't optimize a in-house emulator to run on the PS4. And same with the PS5 so far. I feel like the PS5's hardware is strong enough to emulate PS3. I really do. I think the PS5's hardware could be strong enough to just brute force emulate all of Sony's previous consoles. It doesn't even need to emulate the PS4 because they're both x86. They're just basically PCs, which is really cool. Another thing I like about consoles, especially of this generation, at least the Wii was like this. It's been a while since I broke open an Xbox. They all have arrows pointing to the screws that you need to remove, like, to get to access the next part of the system. My other PS3, my personal PS3, the one I showed y'all that I butchered, was, again, I didn't know what it was worth, and it was a quick fix, and I ended up not putting all the screws back just because I knew I had to keep taking it apart to reflow the GPU and CPU. So I was like, well, I'm not gonna pull the screws, and if I gotta open this up, every few weeks or so. And getting into that, moving on, I'll show y'all, or go ahead and tell y'all what the issues are on this if you already really don't know. So these get the yellow light of death, which is actually very similar to the red light of death, or red ring of death from the Xbox, which, surprisingly enough, it turns out, from an article in 2009, the Xbox 360, the white one, ended up having a 54% failure rate from red ring of death stuff just in 2009, which is crazy. Obviously, that's going to start going up with all these consoles, because ultimately what kills them is heat. Heat killed these consoles. Let's see if I'm missing a screw. Yes, I am. So, I'm missing two, actually, I gotta take out. So ultimately what kills these things is they just overheat. And whenever heat cannot be properly dissipated from the things that are generating the heat, in this case the CPU and GPU, it ends up just basically cooking them, and it ends up bleeding that heat back into the board. PCBs are made of copper, which is a really good conductor of heat. So when that heat cannot be properly dissipated through the heatsink, it goes into the board and other components of the board, which ends up being a really big problem, because you start getting capacitors that die out from the heat cycle. And it's not 100% the heat, it's just easiest to describe it like that, but it's also heat cycles. So rapid cooling and rapid heating, the expansion and contraction of those components is what ultimately kills them. Now, let's make sure I'm not... Okay. I think a screw fell out. No, this did. This is a like clip for the front panel, I believe. So let's go ahead and unclip this to get it out the way. And luckily I have an extra one of these as well. I basically have a whole donor console. But anyways, also around the same time, oh, this thing's dusty. I'm definitely have to get some undust this here in a little bit. But around the same time, there was a law enforced. I don't know if this was a global thing or if this was just in the United States. And of course, whatever happens in the US, fortunately and unfortunately, impacts the rest of the world. But they were trying to reduce the amount of lead or completely remove lead from solder, which I understand why. But a lot of other solder is just, you have to make more expensive solder to work as well as the cheaper leaded stuff. So yeah, it ended up not holding up well, and all that heat bled back into the board, and the rapid expansion and contraction of these solder balls or joints underneath the CPU and GPU also led to the red light of death. So 99.9% of the time, whenever a console experiences, or the PlayStation experiences, the infamous red light of death, it's usually the solder balls or these capacitors that I'll get around the show. The capacitors is more of a recent development. The reason why the capacitor issue was found much later on was a mixture of two things. Toshiba actually used very similar capacitors, or I think actually the same exact capacitors, in their laptops. So when people's laptops started dying, they definitely wanted to get that fixed and figured out, and the same capacitor used in the laptop was used in the PS3, and that's when it clicked. They were like, oh wow, this may be the PS3 problem. And the reason why we didn't know this until later on is the general fix method, which is the one I'm going to be attempting today, spoiler alert, is applying heat to the board, and heat can revive most capacitors, especially these capacitors that die and go out. Heat can indeed revive them. So when people were applying heat to the board, to fix what most people at the time thought was the solder balls and solder joints underneath the CPU and GPU, they're also applying heat to these capacitors, which are right around the same area. So that's where the confusion arose from. Just apply heat and it fixes it, and that's why people got various results. Some people got theirs working till today with no issues. Some people only lasted a few days, weeks, months, etc. Usually, if you play a very intensive game, a good example being The Last of Us specifically, there's a couple scenes that can cause instant red lights of death, which is, I believe, the clicker scene in the Molotovs can cause it to crash, and if it does that, it's usually a GPU issue with the solder balls. But if it crashes randomly, especially on startup, that's more akin to the capacitors just not being able to provide enough juice. And the good thing I would like to say about the capacitor thing is, luckily, I do have a hot air rework station over here. And that's all you really need to replace those, I'm just gonna put the screw back here so I don't forget what it was for. That's all you need to replace the capacitors. I'm not good with a soldering iron. I've never had good luck with the soldering iron. My hands aren't very steady, and for some reason, like, no matter what brand soldering iron I get, no matter what flux I use and tips, I cannot heat it up enough to remove the component from the board. And if I do, I'm too shaky. And I'm also not good at reapplying solder to the board. So that's the reason why I like the heat gun method, because you can leave all the previous solder on the board, and since it's just for capacitors, the whole lead-free thing doesn't really matter at that point because it's not experiencing insane heat cycles. And that's fine to reuse, in my opinion. I'm sure official repair techs would like to disagree, but I'm just using my own anecdote here, again. But, that's how I replace surface mount components, is just using a hot air station and just reusing the solder and using some flux to help clean it all up. The whole reflow debate, that also gets repair techs all in a doozy whenever you repair a GPU by putting it in the oven or something along those lines. That really gets repair techs going, because I agree with them, that's not the proper way to fix it. The proper way would be to remove the GPU and CPU and reball it, which that's the proper method. And I would love to pay, because I don't straight up, I don't have the equipment for it. A lot of people can just eyeball it with a heat gun, but it's risky. You really want, I think you need like a BGA. It's kind of like an X-ray, I think. I could just be talking out my ass, but it helps you line up the balls on the CPU with the contacts on the board and make sure you don't bridge anything and just line it up perfectly. So I don't have any of that. So what I do is, again, just heat up the board with the heat gun to hopefully soften, not completely melt obviously, but help soften up those solder joints underneath the CPU and GPU and melt them together essentially. And since I do have a proper heat gun, I am able to adjust temperature and pressure, like how fast it's blowing air up the gun, and I'm able to have that type of precision, which is pretty important, because like some people use hair dryers, and if it works, it works. Like I'm not gonna be a hypocrite and be like, oh, you should use a heat gun with precise temperature control. Like I'm not gonna be a hypocrite about that, but they usually don't get hot enough, and again, the temperature on them, like you can't control. You don't see the temperature coming out of it. So that's why I invested in this, was so I can control my temperature. And again, it's great for replacing surface mount components. I'm almost getting through with this. I really don't have much else to say about repairing these until we actually, get into the console itself, not console, but the board itself. So I'm actually going to try throwing up a time lapse of me disassembling this. My time lapse on my phone does not have a wide angle mode, which is really, really dumb, but I'll try it out and see how it works so I don't talk your guys' ears off too much, and don't drop your screwdriver. So hopefully that little time lapse worked good. On my end, it was only like 10 seconds long for the hyperlapse, which was crazy. I wanted it to be a little bit longer, but it's all good. It's all good. I could have adjusted the frame rate, but this thing's pretty dusty, which is good. Again, it means the likelihood of someone being in here is very low. Also, I'm not going to count. Actually, I might as well count. I think this might be a 19 blade fan. If it isn't, then I think I have a 19 blade fan for my other one. So let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 17. This is probably a 17. I forget where I started from, but I think this is a 17. Let me grab my other fan right now, which should be over here in my room. Let's see. It's count what this one is. The 19 blade is louder, but I think it's superior for cooling. Let's see. We'll start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Ah, this is a 15. Maybe I counted this one wrong. I'm being dumb. Let's recount. This was a 15. That's my old one. We'll start here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah. Ah, these are 15 blades. I thought these were at least... I can't count. So I do want to get a 19 blade in the future. They're louder, but they also cool better. So, of course, in this case, that's really what I want. I mean, I want this console to live. But we're basically in the end game in terms of disassembly. I need to find my screwdriver. And these screws right here, they're a pain. They're a pain on the Xbox too. It's worse on the Xbox with the little X-clip system. These strip out. I have a set that did strip out. Then again, I probably didn't have the right tools at the time when I did this a few years ago on my original system. This is the fattest tip that's in the iFixit kit, so hopefully it works. If not, I'll just use a flathead. But yeah, oh wow, yeah, that was really easy. I guess having the right tools really helps out whenever you're trying to repair stuff. But like 2-3 years ago when I fixed that other PS3, I was really experienced at fixing electronics. I just couldn't afford nice tools. So having an iFixit kit like really changed things for me, because I had all these bits all together and I didn't have cheap Chinese tools that I didn't care about and I would just lose. But as you can tell, this iFixit kit's been through it, man. I've abused this thing. But let's remove these little clips and remove the heatsink cooler. It's a little stuck on. Let's see. Ah, no, I'm being a little slow. I gotta take off this panel first. Be careful not to damage any of the ribbon connectors. So I'm pulling this one through. I think this one, yeah, okay, that's fine. This one's a little bit more play. So, get the little shield off. And, oh wow, this is interesting. Maybe this has been worked on before. I could be wrong, but in all the documentation that I've seen for this PS3, these are the capacitors that are underneath this, and they have like God, this is like tape or, no, this is like a thermal pad, but it's really old. Let's see if my other board had one on the back, because if it did, I sure did not remove it, because I just recently found out about this whole capacitor thing. So, yeah, my old board didn't have those on there. What's the part number on these right here? I have extra thermal pads that I'll put on here because these are toasted, but let's see if they're the same part number. Neck token. Let's see, OE128. Yeah, and there's even an indent left on the you can't see it. I can see it, but there's an indent left on this like thermal pad from the lettering. This is very interesting right here. I'm gonna take those off because I'm gonna replace it with newer and better thermal pads, and I dropped the IHS from the other board onto this. I gotta be more careful. But I am gonna pull these off. I thought that was quite interesting. I could have just missed it in other videos, but I've always seen these as exposed. I definitely wouldn't have removed them from my system. Unless this thing has been worked on before and someone had the same idea of wanting to put thermal pads on it. So, after that, we should be able to start to remove this cooler. Forget how it quite comes off. Let's see. Believe these clips hold it down. I think my clips are broken on my system. Again, y'all can just see like how little I actually cared about my oh nope, I just needed to tug. Okay. Yeah, y'all can just see how little I cared about my system, and because I didn't know what they were worth. Yeah, this is white thermal paste. This is like what they used back in the day. It was super cheap. It's just what they had. So yeah, the chances of this being worked on are very slim. Just very interesting that there was thermal pads on there. So Another cool thing, I believe this is the IHS from, let's see. Yes, this is my cell IHS from my old board. The lettering was completely gone on mine. I didn't know they were supposed to have lettering until I looked very closely on my old one, and then I saw in videos people actually had lettering on their IHS. Another annoying thing is the connector always comes off for the battery. It goes right back on the pins. It's just annoying that they always come off. Like, why? But this, let's see. And I apologize about my chair. It's just, I promise, like, yeah, I'm kind of a big boy. Like, I'm 6'5", 200 something pounds, but this chair is just wonky that I have. I mean, she creaks. She's fighting for her life. Having a little bit of difficulty getting us off. This console I care about. I paid $45 for it, and I drove 3 hours to pick it up, and then 3 hours back, so it was an all-day ordeal just to pick up this console, because even broken ones were going for a lot of money on eBay or near me. So I see some people get good deals. They buy broken ones for like $20, and I'm like, off eBay, and I'm like, you know what? Good for you. Like, honestly, like that's great that you're able to pay that. But I think especially with everything going on, they dramatically raised up in volume, and this spring just came out of something. Okay. We'll just ignore that. Maybe that fell in the console at one point. I thought that might have been a Blu-ray spring for like the Blu-ray loading mechanism, but that doesn't seem to be it. Something must be screwed on here, because these are not wanting to. This is not wanting to come off. Maybe these are clips in here. I think there's like little clips right here that holds this into place. So let's see if I can squeeze and pull at the same time, because I don't have any pliers near me right now to help squeeze. Let's see, let's try using this instead. They're not wanting to release. Don't want to break it either, but this thing's so old. Like, everything's super brittle and fragile on it. And I'm trying not to move my chair too much, because I'm sure it's a lot louder in my microphone than it is IRL. Yeah, let's see. What is... Yeah, it's definitely these right here. It's gotta be. But I cannot get them off. Could just break them, but I'm gonna try not to do that. Could just grab me some pliers. Yeah, I might have to do that. I might have to grab me some pliers. Let me see if I can look around here for any. Probably have some near my 3D printer. I don't think I removed these on my old board. Why, like, let's see. Did I? Ah, I did. That's what it is. Okay. Yeah, I was being a Neanderthal. Yes, those screws need to come out. I'm sure someone was yelling at me, take those screws out. Yeah, I see. They were not on my old board. Again, like I said, man, it's been a while since I fully disassembled one of these, because again, my personal unit just was missing a lot just for easy disassembly. Like, I didn't care. I didn't just thought it was a $20 PS3. But now, yes, there we go. Everything opens up now. And over here, you can see there's some thermal pads on the plate. There are more of these capacitors. There's thermal pads on the, I guess these are like MOSFETs, or not MOSFETs, inductors. And you can just see, like, look at that thermal paste. I just picked up a chunk of it. Oh, man. Alrighty. So, guess I'm just gonna take some of this chunks off with my fingers just because, yeah, easier cleanup. These right here are the PlayStation 2 chips. One of these is the CPU, one's the GPU. They don't get super hot, they get cooled by thermal pad. I might get a bigger piece just to cover the entire IHS. Don't understand why Sony didn't do that, but I don't think it's that big of a deal. But yeah, this thing is dusty, man. Just horrible. So let's get all this old thermal paste off. I like to go dry first. So just get the majority of it off. And I am gonna blow it with compressed air to get all the dust and debris off the board. And I'm gonna wipe over it with alcohol as well. Let me go ahead and do that actually. That way if any alcohol gets on the board, the air will just blow it straight off. So, there's no problem with going too much. This stuff is non-conductive, so even if you drench your board in it, theoretically should be fine. Not that you should want to, but I like to use a lot. Obviously, you're going to want to do this to the back side of your heatsink as well. Just, I'm not going to this very second, but I will be doing it. Okay. So now let me hook up my, my air compressor. I have an electronic one. Let's see. Okay. And blow in this direction. Hopefully don't blow any of the screws away. And that should be fine right there, just to get all that debris off so I don't cook it while I'm blasting it at 300 degrees Celsius. So, another important step to reflowing, again, I have to say reflow with quotation marks, because, yeah, it's not the proper way. You want to keep the board level. I'm going to try using the power supply in this case. No, a little too high. Let me try this dead hard drive over here. It's like an 80 gig hard drive or something. Yeah, this should be level enough. Just general levelness is what you're wanting to go for here. Yeah, that should be fine. Actually, let me try balancing it here. Yeah, that should be fine. So, if you have a hair dryer and that's what you're gonna want to use it. You might have to do a little bit longer. You could cook your board just from keeping it there for too long, but again, I have a heat gun and I'm gonna have the temperature set to 300 degrees Celsius. That's around the maximum you want to have set. And in my case, I'm using the large nozzle, and I'm gonna set this here so it doesn't turn on quite yet. But what I like to do is I like to warm up around the board, not get it hot, but warm it up so the expansion and contraction that the rest of the components face isn't as bad. And part of that is you want to get heat on these capacitors. Again, because I'm doing it like this, I have no idea what the original culprit for this yellow light of death is. I have no way of knowing. But I can do some benchmarks later on to help further diagnose it, and I just want this to work, so I'm going to apply heat to these capacitors on the rear as well. They don't need as much heat as the CPU and GPU. The CPU and GPU is the important part. And I'm not sure how other people are going to react, but another trick I like to use, and this just is not for, this isn't just for this specifically, but for a lot of electronic repairs I do, I'm going to use flux. I'm not removing the CPU or GPU from the board, but flux is a good way of cleaning up oxidation off of metals, especially this tin and silver solder. I have no way of applying this, so I am just going to use my fingers. This is not good flux. This came with my soldering iron, but something is better than nothing. And remember, we're not trying to, well, in this case, we're not trying to remove this CPU or GPU. We're trying to fix any possible cracked solder joints underneath it. Fix. I said fix. I have to use the quotation or bunny ears with that. But I just like to put some flux around the edge of it, and move the board around so some of the liquid flux can somewhat make contact and clean up the oxidation off these solder balls and joints. That's all flux does. It just helps remove any of the impurities in the metal, and that's part of the reason why these fails cracking and stuff. And whenever you help remove the oxidation impurities, it helps lower the melting point, which is why people use soldering for repairs. It helps reduce the melting point. But in this case, it's just hopefully extending the life of those solder balls a little bit more. And you don't want to heat this up too much, because again, this is meant for remove, like you use flux for removing and soldering components, and you don't want to aim too much heat because that can happen. And if you do it prematurely, you rip pads off the board, and then you get a dead board. So I'm gonna just apply heat in the general area. Always keep the nozzle moving. You don't want to keep it blasted in one spot, because that's how you burn things up. But I am just gonna briefly go over it. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. I don't know how my mic is gonna pick this up. But just like so, just preheating the board. This heat gun works really well, so it's already starting to get warm. Again, all this copper in here is a really good conductor. So that should honestly be fine. I mean, it doesn't need to be perfect, just helps. So now I'm gonna try and heat up this flux first. And it's gonna be a mess, especially since I just used my fingers to drench it on there. You could use like a Q-tip or something, or use a syringe. Usually high quality flux comes in a syringe and isn't a gel and grease like this stuff was. But we'll do that. Get it all melted, and then just tilt the board around to help some of it get underneath the substrate and come in contact with those pins, keeping the heat gun moving. You don't want to keep it in one spot, or you'll unsolder something. And I wasn't perfect in my placement, so, but you know what? It helps with my peace of mind, and it may or may not help. We'll just keep going here. Stuff is super thick, but that should honestly be fine, because now what we're gonna do is, I'm left-handed, so I'm gonna try and keep my arm out the way, but now we want to direct heat onto the CPU and GPU itself, letting the heat transfer to the PCB underneath the CPU substrate into the PCB to get those solder balls nice and warm. Not fully melted, just nice and warm. And the key here is nice circular motions, not keeping it in one spot. And you're going to want to do this for a good bit. I might even throw up a time lapse or hyperlapse for this, but yeah, you're going to want to do that for the CPU and GPU. I'll throw up a little time lapse now. Now that that's done, basically I spent about 7 minutes heating up both the CPU and the GPU. The GPU you should focus on a little bit more. That's more likely to cause of a yellow light of death instead of the CPU, if it's one of these two and not these capacitors. Usually GPU indicates yellow light. Red light, just straight up red light, usually indicates a dead CPU, unfortunately. But we blasted the board with a good bit of heat, 300 degrees Celsius around, and then focused on the capacitor some on this side, and I will be doing it on the other side. Blasted a lot of heat on the GPU itself and again CPU. And the important part is to just let it all cool down, get down to room temperature, and then I'm gonna focus on cleaning up all this flux. I knew it was gonna make a mess. It just still sucks to have to clean up. So I will be cleaning up all this flux and stuff, and then flipping the board to heat up the other capacitors on the other end. But while this cools down, I'm gonna go find some thermal pads and some other equipment to continue working on this. So I'm gonna give this a little bit to cool, and then I'll be back. So we're back. Unfortunately, I seem to have lost all my thermal pads, which, to be fair, they were my girlfriend's originally for her Wii. I changed all the thermal pads out on her Wii, and I was gonna do it on her Wii U, just haven't done it yet. But I can't find them. She might have put them somewhere, but I can't find them. It's not critical that I put them on right now, especially in this video, considering this video that, again, is just supposed to be a general repair, not guide, but just a little walkthrough, and just trying to restore this thing. And like I said before, and a lot of time has passed for me. It might be for you guys. You know, it just might be a few minutes before I say this stuff, so I don't want to say it too much. But I do plan on delidding this and checking out temperatures. I'm not delidding it in this video, but I'm gonna repaste it, check temperatures. Then in a separate video, it may be a week or so from you guys. I still got to get all the supplies. I got to get some Kapton tape. I get Kapton tape, some super glue, some thermal adhesive, and some conductinaut, which is actually, like, it was pretty hard to find a listing on Amazon that offered Prime for it, which is kind of weird, but whatever. But I gotta get all that stuff, and I guess order me new thermal pads if I can't find any, or find my old ones, to prepare for the next video where I just compare the temperatures, which it's kind of like not anecdote, but like a bet with my friend. He also has a PS3 FAT that he just did a standard repaste on. I think that doing liquid metal between the die and the IHS will make a pretty big difference. Definitely noticeable. I won't say like I want to say at least 3 or 4 degrees, which is like pretty big just from changing that out. I think it'll be like a 3 to 4 degrees change with lower fan speeds, because obviously it's an automatic fan control unless you have it jailbroke, which I will be jailbreaking mine to monitor the temps, but you know, not all people will do that. But I think liquid metal will make a big difference in that case, and the IHSs are made of copper, so it's perfectly fine to liquid metal them, because if they were aluminum, which would be really dumb if they were on this system, but if they were aluminum, I could not. It would just destroy them. I'm gonna do something that might be a little bit painful for you guys, but I'm gonna kind of just drench this board with rubbing alcohol to help clean up all that flux I fucking Neanderthaled on there. So, and then I'll put a heat gun to it again to evaporate any remaining alcohol. But flux is non-conductive, so even if I don't get it all cleaned up, it'll just make it messy, but it won't damage anything. Won't hurt anything. Just make it messy, especially if it melts with normal operation. But I'm gonna throw up a little time lapse again. I'm really enjoying this hyperlapse feature on my phone. I'll throw up another hyperlapse, I guess, of me cleaning all this all up and heating up the capacitors on the rear side of the board. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Alright, so we're finished up with that. All the flux isn't off, it's fine. Again, I'm gonna have to disassemble this system at least 2 more times to do the comparisons I'm wanting to do. So that'll give me an opportunity to clean it up. I might even run it through the dishwasher, which is actually fine for electronics if you just do it by itself. Or put it in a bathtub with some soapy water solution. But just to get everything clean on it. But I guess the next step is reassembly. I will not be completely reassembling this because like there's no point, especially since I do these comparisons. So yes, I'm gonna go ahead and do that now, and I will just do a time lapse for that as well, I guess. So I think I'm at the point where I basically have reassembled everything enough just to power it on. I haven't tried it yet. This is going to be live on camera. And if this doesn't work, you know what? I can always try adding more heat to it. Just adding more heat to it, or replacing the capacitors if I have to. You know, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with failing on the first try. So let's make sure the power switch is flipped to 0. Then let's plug it in. Hope nothing explodes. Flip it. Oh wait, I gotta get the power button touch ribbon cable thingy. So we will just stick that in there. Believe I have that in, right? Yeah. Just rest that there. Now, yep, this light should be red, and if I press it, it should stay green. Fingers crossed. Look at that. Green light stable. Meaning, indeed, this console is repaired. Now, the reason why I say repaired is this could last longer than me. It could last 2 days, 2 hours, 2 minutes. But hopefully this lasts for a good bit. Now, to finish off this video, I am going to reassemble this, jailbreak it, load up The Last of Us, and monitor both temperatures and see if it yellow lights and see what the temperatures are baseline. All this information for the temperatures will be included in the part 2 of this video, but just wanted to tease you guys with how it's turning out. So I'll see you guys then. So guys, it is actually the next day and we are back. I have jailbroken my system. It has worked no problem so far, which is very nice. I just got Webman installed, and according to Webman, we are, let me see if I can pull up temperature controls real quick. Let's see. Oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Hold on. Why isn't Webman wanting to work? Oh, there it goes. Our CPU's at 67 degrees Celsius. Our GPU's at 62. So 67 and 62 at around 25% fan speed, which is actually kind of high, but kind of good. Like, this system is essentially silent right now. It's a little bit higher than I expected, but hopefully a D-lid fixes that, which is what will be in the next video. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to fire up The Last of Us, play a little bit, check temperatures, and see if we yellow light and see how hot the system gets. Alright, so this is where we're at now. I have Webman opened up, refreshing the temperature and system stuff every every few seconds. And I've just been standing right here in The Last of Us just because obviously I don't have my saves and stuff on here, but this scene is somewhat taxing. It's not the most taxing in the game, but we got some flag waving effects, some I guess NPCs over there, and just let it sit here to get up to temperature. And so far it looks like we're bouncing anywhere between 69 to 70 degrees Celsius on the CPU and from 68 to 69 on the GPU. Fan is only at 28%, which is like pretty low. Like you can start to hear it, but it's not actually all that bad. But I would consider this a success, or at minimum a partial success. I feel like if I was going to get a yellow light of death, it's going to be during The Last of Us. Obviously I need to play through this a little bit more and, you know, see if it comes back, but I think it's holding up pretty well so far. In the next video, which I'm actually going to start here in a few minutes, I'm going to start doing the delid process show the delid process to repaste, you know, the CPU delidded and GPU, and then do liquid metal. So I will be comparing temperatures, same scene, maybe even set the fan percent back to 28 if it ends up being super low and doesn't need to ramp up to that, but we'll see. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Usually I don't do stuff like this, but I really wanted to do it just to get this, you know, information out there. But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see y'all in the next one.